What I say to principals is, you're the conductor. You won't be able to play each one of those instruments to any great success, but you can tell when they're making beautiful sound. One of the problems that has emerged in the last decade or so, indecisiveness is a big problem for leaders. Thinking that you can make decisions by consensus. That doesn't work. As a principal, you're in charge of the lot. The buck stops with you. The leader must make the decision.
Equality is equality. It's neutral. This is the line here. No one goes up there. By doing that, you're not doing equality anymore.
I think it's absolutely a priority that we have strong women leaders. And when I say strong, that's a word for saying influence. They have the capacity to speak. If they're in a room or a board table and there's one or two ladies and there's 7 or 8, have a voice. And I think we stopped nurturing the young men because we felt there was an imbalance and we wanted to restore the balance. You know, we have boys in our school from 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years old, and something happens, they get to year 12 and they don't want to be a leader. What has gone wrong in the meantime? And I say to the principals, what have you been doing since year 5 and 6 to nurture those young men so they want to be leaders?
In today's episode, we sit down with Dr. Paul Teys. Dr. Teys has over 40 years of experience in educational leadership. He's a former school principal and has led at various schools throughout his career. Today, he works as an executive coach, supporting principals and aspiring leaders. He's also a published author of 2 books, including Now You Are a Principal. Dr. Teys has a deep passion for empowering school leaders, giving them the strategic insight, tools, and confidence they need to thrive in complex educational environments.
Dr. Paul, welcome to the podcast. So what is it that you do right now?
Thank you, Anwar. Thank you for the opportunity. At the moment, I'm consulting in educational leadership, mainly principals, deputy principals, executive leadership teams, but also do quite a lot of work, strategic work with ASBAR, School Business Administrators, and also in people and culture. So largely offering what I call myself the principal in your pocket. So for schools and leaders, just having someone accessible and available to support them, you know, with running and leading schools.
And one of the topics we want to discuss today, or I would like to discuss today, is that concept of leading leaders, meaning at schools in the case of your industry, Dr. Paul, especially I'm assuming with larger schools, although even probably applicable to small. You will educate us about all that in a minute, but you know, with larger schools in particular, you start to feel the need to have the so-called, what we call in the corporate world, executive team, no matter what you call them, and who cares what they call, but you need to have leaders, in other words, that they are their own leaders, and you want to lead these leaders. You need to be able to lead these leaders as the principal, correct? Would that be correct?
That's absolutely right. So we see in the independent school sector, we see ourselves as CEOs, chief executive officers, and many boards, when they put out the prospectus to recruit new principals, they use that terminology very purposefully.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah. So the role now, there was a period in history when principals were the educational leaders and that was their sole responsibility. So they were the subject matter experts when it came to teaching and learning.
Yes.
That's evolved. And so the principal now in schools needs to have a team. You call them executives, senior leaders, but they are subject matter experts in particular areas of school operations.
Yes.
And so the principal's role is to ensure that individually and collectively they're working the best they can possibly be for the school and the community.
Funny that you said principals consider themselves CEOs, and I so agree with that. That's how I see them anyway. And we have a couple of schools. We signed up one recently out of South Australia where actually there is a CEO there. There is a CEO. It's a group of 3 schools, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. Can't remember the name, but
it could be
Tyndale. Tyndale.
Yes. I was about to say that.
Yes.
The Tyndale group of Christian schools operate from that sort of model.
Okay. So we both agree on this. As a matter of fact, I was going to ask you to clarify what the role of the business manager is, because in my views, you know, I see them as the COO/CFO. Would you explain to us what their role is?
I agree. That's a great a great description. So you have the principal, CEO, and then the modern or the more contemporary view about the business manager is the chief financial officer and or chief operating officer.
There you go. I got it right.
Yeah, you did. So there's this educational requirement or focus in schools, but they have to be a business. They've got to be sustainable.
Absolutely.
They've got to be viable. And in the sorts of schools where I work, they could have annual budgets of 20, 25 million up to $100 million. Yep. So if you think about running a $100 million business, the business manager has a really crucial role to play in ensuring that I'd like to simplify it this way, Anwar. So schools to be effective and to deliver outstanding outcomes for kids and students need to have the best educational programs possible, co-curricular programs, music and so on. And the business manager's role is to ensure that the operations of the school support the educational programs more than just a transactional role. Yeah. So they are the co-pilot, if I can use that analogy.
Yes.
Co-pilot for the principal in the effective running of our schools.
And a strong business manager, that's my guess. You're the expert to adjust, to comment on what I'm saying and adjust it. The way I see it from being a CEO myself and understand a little bit about the business world, a strong business manager, the fact that they are COO and CFO would allow the principal, if they're really strong at that role, they can be really relied on, you do your thing there, allows the principal to do their thing, because it is a big thing, because they are COO in a sense as a serious corporate and business role to their role, aspect to their role, but also something special about schools, isn't there, that doesn't exist in any other business, where the product is a human being, is a vulnerable human being. I mean, this is another world of responsibility and risk and all that. So you want that principal to be a strong business person, to be creative, and to be a human being that is looking after human beings. I mean, that's very unique, right? So it's so important to have a strong leader as a COO and CFO for you to be able to do that role well, right?
Agreed.
Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah. So I used to talk about the work of schools is growing adults. That's what we do.
Yes.
We have children come to us at 3 years old, 3 years of age, even younger.
Yeah.
And as the principal CEO, supported by the business manager and the other leaders, have to have a vision of the school 18 years on when that child graduates. And so what I always talk about is the quality of the attributes, the graduate attributes. What are we doing to develop young adults who can take a leadership and a service role, contributing citizens? And that requires the business manager to understand, which they do, what is the core purpose of our school and our business, and that is to grow young adults, great graduates, and that's a human relationships, human leadership.
But the business manager, if they are COO and CFO, they hardly have enough time to worry about that. They really need to be strong business people, because you don't have a strong business, you don't have school, and you can't teach anybody.
Yeah, the way they can impact outcomes for students is their membership of the executive team. There are some schools where the business manager's not on the senior leadership or executive leadership. That's a poor model.
It would be.
Yeah.
I can hardly see how that could work.
So when the executive is sitting around, the business manager's tuned into the conversations, the needs. I felt the most effective business managers were ones where I would go to them and say, look, I know it's not in the budget, but this is a particularly important priority right now. Can you help me manage this?
Can you make it work? Can we make it work?
And so the business manager was always, yes, let's see how we can do that.
That's it.
Because they know the numbers so well. They understand how you can make things happen, what the compromises might be.
Yeah.
That's the effective business managers. But
So as the principal, you're connected, your stakeholders are directly the community. That's the parents and the staff and the board. You develop that vision, how you're going to manage these three high-level stakeholders, and you need someone to help you to execute. That is where that strong business manager comes in.
Yeah, and in a school, it's the business manager and then your deputy or your head of primary school or head of secondary. You mentioned stakeholders. Where you said how schools are unique to other businesses. Some of our schools, independent schools, will have 1,000 employees. Some 300, some are smaller ones might have 100.
Sure.
But all of those stakeholders get direct access to me as the principal. If they're not happy with something, they can get me within a flash.
Yes.
Right? Maybe they've got to go through the executive assistant. That doesn't happen at Qantas, does it?
No.
If you've got...
They have that expectation. You're servicing the community somehow. Although you're running a billion-dollar business, which is so stressful, but they still see you as you're a leader in that community.
That's right. Because you have taken care of their children.
Yes.
So we've as a parent, a family, we've given you our children.
Yes.
We want you to care as much about them as we do. And they expect with that, because they pay fees, that they will get service. And we provide that.
Yes.
That's what's unique about schools. And so if there's a problem with a parent paying fees because they've fallen into hardship, temporary or otherwise, they expect to be able to talk to the business manager. And guess what? The business manager is available. They don't put them off. But where else in the corporate world can you get access to the CEO or the CFO or COO
I know.
if you're dissatisfied with something?
Yes, you're right.
And that's where schools are a little bit unique, and that's why the key leaders in schools have got to understand the human relationship, community engagement, and what it means to lead a school.
Yeah. Another bigger reason why for a school to really compete and thrive, why you need strong leaders. Business manager is only one of them. You need strong leaders across the board, maybe 5 if I was to guess. I would love for you to explain who are the leaders, what kind of roles would they do, what do they look after. But I can certainly see the fact that, as you said, there's more demand on the role of the leader being the CEO, the principal, because of this aspect of it, that the fact that it's a school, the product is the kids and the parents who pay for that product. There's an aspect of a community expectation, kind of caring, duty of care is a different level to when you're building products, a little plastic thing that has got no shelf life that sits on the shelf, to being you're molding a human being, the most important person to the person paying the money. Why you need a strong leaders to execute, because you're really demand to also be playing a community leader role. So what's the leadership team like? An ideal in your model? You said there's 7 models. Take us through that, and what's the ideal one? Yeah.
So generally you would have your principal as CEO. There'd be the business manager as CFO. There'd be some operational head as your COO. There'll be someone who's in charge of the teaching and learning in the school. That would be a director's position.
Makes sense.
And then the sub-schools. Schools generally are made up of 3 or 4 sub-schools. So there's the early learning centre, junior school.
Okay.
So you would have a leader and a campus leader there. And there's 2 other areas you might find executive leadership, which is in HR. Right?
Yes.
People and culture.
Yes.
They're generally now you would have someone at a senior level.
15.
That's right.
Yeah.
Technology, which is more than hardware, that's communications. Technology might have somebody with a seat at the executive table because it's such an important part
head
of school
IT
operations.
or CIO or something.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So schools are moving towards some of the corporate models. And then the other one now, which you probably find, is the director of wellbeing. Or welfare, that looks after the whole student experience in a school, how connected the students are, how engaged they are. So models vary, but that would be, you mentioned 5, you'd be pretty close to the money between 5 and 7, who ought to be that leadership team that the principal's job then is to lead those leaders. And the models, I use coaching, metaphor, sport as a coach, or conductor of an orchestra as another metaphor for the role of the principal or CEO in a school. Yeah, and so the balance is between delegation and autonomy with oversight and accountability. Okay. That's the fine line that you would work that in your own business.
Yeah.
Anwar, with your executive people who you've delegated responsibility to, being a software engineer, you got to keep an eye on what your software engineers are doing, without intruding, without being oppressive or overbearing.
Yeah, still learning a lot about that. Sometimes stuff it up, and it's an interesting thing. To me, that's why this conversation is so timely. I didn't even know it was going to be about that. That's amazing, as I've discovered that you've got these qualities, these experiences. I'd love to learn more from you about leading leaders. Such an interesting topic, because I find myself one of the mistakes I make comes from a good place. So a leader comes to you, let's say, complaining about one of their team members or something there where it's sort of maybe borderline legal or or someone being ungrateful in the sense they're not doing their job and being taken advantage of the company, what I'm trying to say, yeah? What I find myself doing is I want to help them out of caring about the entire thing, but also that leader, I end up jumping in their position. I take their role, take over their role to help instead of what the organizational psychologist described. It's just said you got to stay behind them. So they need to be behind between the employee and you. So you're speaking with them and let them talk to the employee and deal with that problem.
Yeah.
You coach them, listen to them, coach them, provide solutions, but they need to, on their own, go back and deal with the problem. I sometimes stuff this up. I, out of want to help and ego and passion and whatever, I end up getting involved myself. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so that once again there's a balance, isn't there, between being a support and a reference and a resource.
But you said a coach as well. I love that.
Coach. So the in the short term, you might jump in and solve the problem, and that's a short-term solution. But that's not sustainable and doesn't help the long term.
How about the next time? Exactly.
Yeah. So you invest time in that person. Initially, for the first project, you delegate to them or you give them it'll take you time. So the coaching takes time. It means a first initial meeting to clarify expectations, understand what the deliverables are, what support or resources do you need. So there's a lot of time. And then there's just those check-ins, weekly or fortnightly. What are we up to? Do we have to pivot on anything? Are there any resources you need? Do you need some more funding there? Could another team help you? So that takes time. But once you've been through that process once or twice in that coaching front mindset, the skill level and the capacity of that leader grows and develops. So each time they're given a new project that you delegate to, and when I say delegation, I don't mean shedding tasks. That's where it's appropriate to delegate to them. So if it's a marketing person or someone on your communications team and you're trying to develop a new strategy for a particular niche market, might be disability services or whatever, then, that's going to take some effort initially, but then they get up and running with that after some time. So coaching is a good metaphor, sports coaching. The conductor of an orchestra, what I say to principals is you're the conductor. You won't be able to play each one of those instruments to any great success. You might have some ability in one of the instruments because you did it to year 12.
Yeah.
But you can tell when they're making beautiful sound.
Yeah.
And you can see, wait on, you're just out of sync over there and I need you to tune up a bit. And that's where the role of the CEO becomes important.
Dr. Paul, this is a great analogy. Thank you for sharing. But also the word coach is great. But, if we think about both of these examples, you're still talking about, or at least it can be perceived to be, of course, it's not what you mean, but it can be perceived to be, you're still talking about a coach and a player. What's different here about leading leaders is the players, they're not playing they're not kicking the soccer ball or the AFL ball themselves. They are the coaches themselves. You're coaching coaches, in other words, in many ways. So what is different? I'm sure there's so many differences. Share with us one big difference. In other words, mistakes like people like me or principals that you coach make in terms of the distinction between the style of managing the leaders versus when they were themselves managing, direct employees. What are some of the distinct differences and maybe common mistakes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the approach, can I just, without oversimplifying, is the same because you're dealing with, at the grassroots level, the player, or at a school level, the teacher. You're dealing with someone with a particular skill set, a particular capacity, a particular awareness about their role. And so your job as the leader, be it the middle leader or senior or principal, is to give them clarity and transparency around their work. So if there's an expectation on them,
true.
Be very clear about what that expectation is. Give them the why, the benefits of, and then again, it's about resourcing, isn't it? So the player that comes in at the lowest level would have a lower skill level than, the forward leader or whatever it might be, the sectional leader in strings, for example, in an orchestra. But I don't think the work is any different. A teacher in a classroom is a leader of 15 or 20 physics students, if we can talk about our common degrees.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same. And when you go up the layers of leadership, the stakes get a bit higher, the complexities grow, but the fundamentals are still the same. You're trying to get the best out of a person.
Yeah.
That's the role of the leader.
Yeah, right.
And if it's a team, then obviously you have to develop each individual leader. But when you sit around your board table or your executive table, you're getting the best out of the group. So it's how often do you invite each person to speak, or do you ensure they have a perspective on everything that's on the table? Do you expect them to come to the meeting prepared? And when there's an action, do they understand what's involved? So that's where I think leading leaders becomes important, again, to make sure they know what's expected. If you go to have a meeting, Anwar, asking people to come for an hour of your time, purposeful agenda, pre-reading, the expectation. So we're getting together today because we need to develop a product that's going to meet the needs of the mining fraternity. So leading leaders, I think, is no different to leading at any level.
The playbook is the same.
I think it is. That's how I've operated.
Especially with the example that you used. I think you talked about responsibilities or something. You're right. No matter what that person is doing, the employee is doing, there's always job description and responsibility. The clarity on that in itself, and that's then you're managing that, and then you're going to manage outcomes and accountability and KPIs and targets and bonuses and rewards. I mean, it's really is the same. Just the details change, but the playbook is the same.
I think so. I agree. And that's the job of the leader at any level, is to bring out the best of the people that
at that job, at that role.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because you want the teacher to be the very best in front of the children, the students.
Yes, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, if you're running a co-curricular program, let's say, for example, it's in public speaking, developing, that person leading that is more than a transactional staff member. They're leading a group of young people to speak better, speak in public audiences.
How often do you get in the industry here, folks, being in the private school? Should I use the word private? Is that generic enough? Yeah. The private school industry in Australia, how many leaders at principal level leaders do you get from outside the industry? They haven't been a teacher, for example.
Yeah, very few. Very few.
They need to know education, yeah?
Yes, yeah. You've got to understand the context. Dealing with parents. As a teacher, you might have 180, 210 students that you will have interaction with through classroom activity. If you're making decisions at the CEO or COO level about instructional leadership, pedagogy, classroom practices and all that, you've got to know what that is. But it's not so much that people from outside the industry can't be effective. It's just that people outside the industry see schools as a bit peculiar. And you know why? Because they go back to their own school days. And they go, why would I want to be a teacher, or why would I want to be a leader? I think there's some bad press around schools, you know. So a lot of people don't see it as a pathway or a career. But the skills, the context is very unique. Not so much the skills, but the context. What is it like to deal with parent complaints? What's it like to manage, parents who are extremely disgruntled? What is it like to deal with toxic employees? So that can be across sectors.
Wow,
the
that
uniqueness
is such a topic. We can talk for 2 days just about this topic.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Me being a parent and sent my son, bless him, to schools, I would love to pick your brain on that. Before we go into something like that, there's an area that I'm still very vague, and it would help also other principal to learn from you about your knowledge about this topic. The board. What's the typical board of a school? How many different types of boards? And is in the private school industry, is there some of them? I mean, is it non-profit and profitable organizations, and how would that affect what kind of board would be?
Yeah. General rule of thumb, if they're a school that receives Commonwealth or state recurrent funding, so they get income from the Commonwealth or state, they're what's called not-for-profit. Therefore, they can't distribute their surpluses to boards or to any member. So they still make a profit. And there are people who frown on that term in independent schools, but call it a surplus. If you're not making a surplus, income over expenses, and you're running a very poor
can't run
school,
the business,
it won't survive.
Yeah.
So, there are profits. But boards generally are volunteers. There'd be a handful of schools in Australia where the board might get paid a small amount of money.
So Let's talk, before we get to that, to understand the spectrum. You talked about the non-profit. Is there profit-based organisations?
There are a few. They won't get any Commonwealth funding. So there's a couple of schools set up. I know of one in Warwick, for example, where they are completely independent of Commonwealth and state funding, and they're a for-profit, and they distribute the profits to
Being
community, but they're very small in number across the country.
Being a principal, before we move on from that point, just quickly, being a principal for so many years across multiple organisations, do you think it's a good idea? Do you feel if the school industry became a business, a real business that needs to make money, profit to shareholders, let's say, imagine we could activate that kind of model, would that be a good thing, or do you still agree with the fact that they should be non-for-profit organisations?
Yeah, I think when you turn to a commercial or profit operation like a corporate, you shift the values change, the purpose change.
Yes.
So if you're running a business, and I haven't run a business where there are shareholders, so I can only talk from what I hear and learn, then there is a mandate, if you like, or a requirement that you generate profits so that shareholders benefit.
Yeah.
In a school, we generate profits so students benefit. So if we're going to generate surpluses, that will be to put back into resources or assets.
So that would be planned out as well, like 3-year plan.
Absolutely.
We want to, let's say, do another playground or whatever.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's a good example.
Yeah. So the barometer changes.
Yeah.
In a not-for-profit school current setting, and private's okay to use, but there is no real private schools in Australia because we all rely on Commonwealth funding to survive. But I think it shifts. The barometer changes from what's best for kids to what's best for shareholders. And we see so many companies and corporations in Australia that their bottom line's the shareholder, and what suffers? Customer service, doesn't it? The quality of care, the quality of service, the accessibility to people. So it would be, in my opinion, a bad thing.
When heard you saying that, it almost I can see parallel in the corporate world when all the profit is going for growth. So you are growing the school. Doesn't have to be physically all the time. It could be investing in the well-being of the teachers and the kids, doing programs like that, or physical things such as physical growth, having another building to get more kids, or better playground, better rugby field, etc. But really, it's growth, isn't it?
It is. It is growth. It's growth for the individuals, for the school, and the community. Lots of our schools are heavily entrenched in the community. They're like community schools. So come back.
What does that mean? What's the community school versus non-community school?
Come back to some of the models.
Yeah.
Many of the Christian schools, for example, might be intimately linked to the local church, and so therefore they're a part of the community.
My son went to St. Mary's in the city.
Absolutely.
That would be an example of that.
That would be an example, yeah. So, and they then rely on the community to support them for their development. Volunteerism, donations, goods and services in kind and those sorts of things. So there's that community school, and that board would be shaped by the community and the parents.
Makes sense.
And maybe large in number. There are others where the fees are very high, $40,000 or $50,000 a year. They will have what's called a more corporate board, where the board members have specific skills,
such as
law,
right.
engineering, accountancy, risk and compliance. So they would actually be invited or encouraged to come onto the board because they're offering a range of corporate skills that the school will benefit from.
But still not getting paid.
No, that's right, generally.
And I like that, actually. Now I'm definitely coming around very quickly. Yeah. I would say to have a board that has all these amazing skills, but they're there to add value as opposed to knowing that they're not going to get anything. It's such a powerful statement.
Yeah, I think so, because then their motivation, if you like, their commitment's different. It's a pretty simple example, but I played a lot of cricket. I was a pretty good cricket coach, and I was asked to coach, by family friends, their sons play cricket.
Yeah.
And I would always say, yes, I'll do it, but I don't want to be paid. And they said, oh, no, we've got to pay you for it. I said, no, I don't want to be paid, because as soon as they paid me,
expectation changes, the relationship changes. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So true.
So I think that's a bit simple but that's how I see it in the school environment. There's so much volunteering for noble reasons and for ideological reasons that benefit the school and the community.
Yeah.
And, but the lesson for the young people growing up to be adults, that's the way you serve your community.
Wow, I didn't think about it like that either. That's very powerful. Yeah. Speaking of the young people, good segue into something that we touched on very quickly over lunch earlier. Something that you're passionate about, and of course you've got to be passionate about it as a principal. That's your goal, is you're building leaders. Every student, your goal in there is to ensure, hopefully the outcome is every single one of these young men become leaders. Leaders doesn't mean you've got millions of dollars. Yeah. Leader as a human being, leader for your family, for the community, for people to look up to you, to be a good example. That's a leader, no matter what you do. You could be a bricklayer or you could be a CEO of Qantas, So in saying that, every principal has that in mind, especially if young men were there. If we were to just focusing on that, doesn't mean we don't want to equally pay attention to the young women as leaders. If we take that example and I happen to only have one son, so I don't have really experiences in bringing up young women. Such an interesting example, and it's a big topic in the last 10 years. It became hugely political, and some people really, at least over in the US and other part of the world, it becomes a big shit fight when you see it being played out on media channels and etc. This whole thing about, I don't know the history of it. You would have a better grasp at it, but from an ordinary observer like me, I feel as if in the last maybe 15 to maybe even 25 years, the whole equal opportunity movement, which is extremely noble. I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure you support just as passionately as myself, for a very good noble reason, somehow squashed certain important qualities in young men that are unique to young men and unique in the sense to make them leaders of the future. They were squashed, maybe not even knowingly being squashed, and the importance or how bad it is to squash them, the negative consequences, in other words, of doing that. We ended up in a situation where people like yourself, you're a very important observer, not being just a principal, but also at your age, looking at the generations before that 25 years, and you're seeing that difference in a big picture like that comfortably. You're seeing there's a wrong pattern, something bad happening here. Can you speak to that, and what's your opinion on that? And in the sense, in particular, in the context of if a principal's watching this, what they can learn from that?
Yeah. In terms of a principal learning, I guess the best message is look after everybody in your school. Look after everybody. And that means that everyone's entitled to be developed, to be grow, to be themselves, and I don't mean be themselves as in breaching boundaries and flying in the face of the school's values and all that. I don't mean that by being yourself. But the problem is it's a taboo topic now, and it has been for quite some time. You started out by saying, well, let's talk about the boys, and then you apologise. So, well, that doesn't mean we don't care about the girls, and that's what's happened. It's become divisive. Schools, if you wanted to put in a program for the young men, then the question, quick back would be, what about the girls? Also, well, I'm sorry, we will look after all of our cohort. We look after all the cohort.
Right now we happen to be talking about that.
That's right, because there's a need here, because young men are graduating in our schools, and this is a bit general, without necessarily the maleness that was once seen as a noble quality and trait. I mean, some men behave badly for sure, but we're not talking about the autocratic or the dominant or the oppressive. We're talking about men who are strong, can make decisions, have self-awareness, they respect females and members of their community, but they are known for a particular maleness. And women can have some of those qualities or not. That's not the point. The point is they're going to live together, they're going to work together, they're going to grow together. So it's important that whatever males and females can offer, age groups, is nurtured and developed. And I think we stopped nurturing the boys as young men because we felt there was an imbalance and we wanted to restore the balance. And has the pendulum swung too far the other way? Well, I don't think so. But let's have a look at how our young men are graduating. And, I see schools where they get to year 12 and there are very, very few boys as captains or leaders. They just don't show up to want to do that. And I say to the principals, what have you been doing since year 5 and 6 to nurture those young men so they want to be
takes
leaders.
years to get there.
And as you said before, a leader isn't necessarily a monetary thing or it's a glorified thing. A leader has influence for positive reasons. And that may be over 2 or 3 or 5 or 10, 15, 100 people, it doesn't matter. But leadership is influence for a positive reason. So, we have boys in our school from 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years old, and something happens, they get to year 12 and they don't want to be a leader. What has gone wrong in the meantime?
Yeah.
What stereotypes have, what opportunities have we given them? Have we encouraged them to join, service and leadership groups or share their talents and skills with others?
Did we over-squash their individuality, which happened to be a male-based individuality, as opposed to a woman-based individuality?
Yeah.
Have we done something there to squash that aspect of individuality, which is based on a male DNA?
I think part of the problem is the random behaviours you'll sometimes get from boys and groups of boys became too hard to deal with. So what was the response? Suppress them.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Instead of saying, all right, well, actually, you got all these great qualities, but gee whiz, that one's not showing up so well, so let's work on that.
Yeah.
The next time you feel like you're not being heard, don't lash out. Let's coach you with some words you can use.
There's a reason why when they lash out anyway. That's psychology.
That's right. Yeah. So what we saw was there's these behaviours from boys.
As if something's wrong with them or whatever.
Yeah, they're challenging.
Yeah.
But let's deal with the behaviours, not the boy or not the person or not the stereotype. And that's where in schools I think we've just moved away from that nurturing and caring for every child and whatever their needs are or aspirations are or whatever their challenges are, and deal with those, depersonalise it, deal with the issues. I mean, I have no qualms whatsoever, and I think it's absolutely a priority that we have strong women leaders. And when I say strong, that's a word for saying influence. They have the capacity to speak. They if they're in a room or a board table and there's 1 or 2 ladies and there's 7 or 8, have a voice, So
equal voice.
So that's what I'm saying about strong leadership is they have the confidence and awareness to be able to make a contribution, and they don't feel that they're suppressed or otherwise. So I have no problem with the status of women in leadership, the calls for more women on boards and all that sort of thing. But I'm a bit old school, Anwar. I still believe in merit-based
100%.
promotion and appointments.
100%.
Merit-based.
Yeah.
And so if this position requires certain qualities and attributes and skills and experience and backgrounds, it ought not matter who applies.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Interesting, the concept of equality, it is sometimes when you try to, it's like there's a phenomenon in physics when you try to experiment with something, the fact that you try to look at it or experiment with it, you've already ruined its nature. So it's wrong. Your experiment's never going to be right. And, equality is a bit like that. When you're trying to fix it, it's like almost, it's hard to fix. It needs to be organic. And in a sense, I'll explain what I mean. Maybe what I said is a little bit incorrect. What I mean by that is if you try to force equality in itself, how is that equality anymore? How can you force equality?
You've distorted it.
Yeah, you've distorted it, Yeah. So, for example, if we have a member in the community that we believe they've been disadvantaged, I'm all for recognising that. I'm all for trying to do something about it. But you don't do something about it by giving them more power.
Yeah.
Equality is equality. It's neutral. This is the line here. No one goes up there. By doing that, you're not doing equality anymore.
Well,
it's not.
I played a lot of basketball, and I just don't agree with the concept of equality, because I would go out in the basketball court. It's about 6 foot, 180 centimetres or so, and I was having to guard someone who was 7 foot, right? And there's no
equality.
There is no equality, and it's like I grew up in the bush, in rural Queensland. I had no sporting opportunities. There were no role models in the area. I only knew farming, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when I moved to the city, there were children with much more knowledge than me. They had reading books that they could access and they could read from. They got music lessons, from professionals. I had none of that. So I can't ask for equality. What I like to use is access, equity, consistency and fairness.
100%.
That's what I think the concept is all about.
You're right. I take back what I said. I should replace it with equal opportunity.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what I actually meant to say, not equality.
Yeah.
So on that basketball field, a great example. You were given equal opportunity to play in that game, in that team, the tall guy and the small guy.
Yeah.
And the best player will win and the best player will get the prize. That's the equal opportunity.
Yeah, and I had to use assets that I had that the big guy didn't have. I was quicker. I was better with my hands.
Yeah.
The big guy was going to get the ball if someone threw it over the top of us.
Yeah.
So, the whole thing of equality is where I think things went a bit skewed.
You're absolutely right.
Whereas I like to say to school leaders, when you look at all of the children, do they all get equal access to sport? Do they get equal access to music lessons? Do they get access to learning, libraries and books?
This example of basketball is so powerful, Dr. Paul. I would love to zoom on it a little bit. Just inspired by what you just said. And going back to my son growing up and seeing how he was treated he was playing rugby because his mum is a Kiwi, big rugby fan as opposed to league. And I remember this whole thing, there was a notion at a certain age where everybody wins, everybody gets the prize.
Yes.
I can't remember the exact context, but definitely for a year or two, they play a game and you're not allowed to say who won or something, everybody wins. What is wrong? I don't know at which age this would be applicable but for, let's say, a 5-year-old or whatever, to come to a game, basketball is so powerful, that example. And for them to leave the game saying, because this thing is so high, James is actually a lot taller. He had an advantage over me. I happen to be shorter. I need to find another sport. For them to come to terms with that and the parents to be comfortable with that, everybody acknowledges that. James won, look, and they laugh about it clearly because he's taller than you. You can see he's better at this game. Maybe the cricket would be better for you. What is wrong with that? Instead of pretending everybody wins at that basketball game, right?
And I agree because I played a lot of sport. And so growing up, there were certain clubs who had more resources, more experienced players who'd played at state and national level. So they were clearly going to perform at a superior level. And here we would come along trying to compete with them. The first time we played them, they might have given us a real hiding. But what did we do? We regrouped. We thought, okay, we were beaten by 40 points. Next time, let's make it 30 points.
Yes.
And next time, 20.
Yes. 3
or 4 matches on, we were competing. And that we learned a lot more about that than what we learned from, don't keep the score.
Yes.
But it's hysterical, Anwar. I was at my niece's, grandniece's game of soccer recently, and she's 7. And here they are in this mixed team, boys and girls, and the goals and all that, and they're not keeping score. They're not allowed to. And this is like 2 or 3 decades in the making.
Yeah.
So you would think the current generation aren't interested. They're just there for the skills, aren't they? No.
Yeah.
They came off the field and I said to my grandniece, how did you go? She said, we won 13-2. I said, how do you know? She said, we keep score. Anyway, the thing is, what do you deal with them if it's 2-13?
Yeah.
That's life lesson. So it was 2-13.
Yes.
What can we do? What can the coach do and all that?
Strategy and grit comes in, and solutions, problems and solutions. Exactly where I was going to go. Let's go back to the basketball game. This kid could be 5, could be 3, could be 7, something like that, really, really young. Their first even sport. I'm going to even go as far as that. And you make it clear. They won, and you tell them, look, they're tall. They've been reaching better. And this kid, imagine they love basketball. They want to play basketball. They go, I want to win at this. And you go, look, you're going to have to jump higher. See, we start to go into problems and solutions and grit, and that's how you're developing people. And you go, look, well, I mean, if you can jump higher, when you look at this guy, James, you see, his feet off the ground is about that much is enough for him to get there. Unfortunately, you have to do that. Do you want to do that? Yes, I want to try.
Yeah.
I start to give him tools and coach him how he can get his feet higher. That's how life should be.
I agree. And that's developing.
Yes.
So you take the basketball, sorry to stay with that, but there was a fellow, he came out from the United States to play in our competition in Toowoomba. Cal Bruton was his name. And he was about 5'6". Now that doesn't cut it on a basketball
Exactly,
field.
yeah.
But what he did, he invented the 3-point goal.
I don't know what that is.
Well, so
I'm not a basketball person.
So in basketball, inside this big circle, semicircle, you get 2 points.
Sure.
If you shoot from outside the semicircle,
I know that
which
one,
is the perimeter, that's a 3-pointer.
Okay.
And he was a gun. So what the team used to do was get Cal the ball, so he would pump up his 3-pointers.
So he made us
that was his contribution.
He made us, yes.
He wasn't running inside the key, trying to steal the ball from the 6 foot.
Made up for the height thing.
And isn't that life? Like you're running a business and you're running a business. Now, you know there are competitors out there. You know people are doing it differently or similarly to you, but that's not your focus. Your focus is on what you can do as the CEO of Martian Logic to 100%. Make sure that what your contribution is outstanding to those. And I think that's where we've gone a little bit, Ori, in politics, political leaders, corporate leaders. You know, there's just not enough accountability for what you can control and what you can do and what you can bring. So, you know, it's like my mother used to hysterically have to call me in for dinner every night. And I said to Mum, I'm not coming in till I shoot 20 free throws in a row.
That's great. That's great.
I get 20. And I'd get to 19 and miss, and I'd have to go back to 1. And I wasn't on my own, you know. Lots and lots of kids that I knocked around with similarly had interests.
That determination.
Could have been in mountain biking, or it could have been in a musical instrument.
Skateboarding.
Yeah, or Monopoly, you know, but they had something that they were fascinated about and they wanted to develop their skills.
It's beautiful.
And that's a uniqueness.
That's so beautiful to see a young person across the board having something like that they are aspiring to be and achieve. It's just, as a parent, the most beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah. And they'll come to your employee and they'll say, anyway, I can't do A, B, and C, but I can do this really well. And you go, well, that's what we need.
Yeah. And what you were saying before inspired me to think about how, you know, as an employee who doesn't have yet experience in life, you know, fairly younger professional, it could be even older, depending on the role they did in terms of them understanding how the world works, meaning the corporate world and the relationship between the corporate world and the shareholders and governments and the environment they operate in and all these sort of things. If they don't have that awareness, it could be that in their 50s and they still have this incorrect view or lack of understanding about how companies work. They seem to think companies is just something that you just create, meaning you can just it's a cut out stuff like you know, you can produce on
cookie cutter.
Cookie cutter, exactly. And that is not the case, as we all know. To create a company, you take a unique path. Every company is created in its own unique path, and that is exactly your point. The tall guy could be creating a company, meaning becoming good at basketball in their own way, and the shorter guy could become really a champion at basketball in their own way as well. Right. Same thing. Every CEO is a human, has got their own strengths and weaknesses, physical and mental and communication skills, all these areas that got strengths and weaknesses in those, and they therefore able to can, not all the time they succeed, create companies in their own unique path.
I agree. And one of the, coming back to schools where I work and working with principals, is I would say to the parents and the students when they enrolled, particularly moving into high school, I would say I will promise you is that when you come to the end of year 12, you will have a range of options available to you that you'll be proud of. So I said my commitment is that you will end up with pathways. It may be university, it may not. It may be trade, it may be travel. I don't mind. But when you come to year 12 and you're thinking about year 13, you will have a range of possibilities that you'll be proud of.
Here you go.
That's what I would say.
Very nice way to say it.
Yeah, and so you used an analogy before. around the different classifications of employment, right? So the student who goes on to become a mechanical engineer, are they any more successful than the student who goes on to do hairdressing? And I had this case in point, and I think it sums up for me what principals, commitment ought to be for students in their care. It was the end of year 12, and we had the valedictory dinner, and a girl came up to me and I said, well, what are you planning on doing, Xanthi, for, post year 12? And she said, I'm doing hairdressing, Mr. Teys. I hope you think that's okay. And I said, I love it. And she said, good, Mr. Teys, when I go on to be a hairdresser, I'm going to be the one with the full appointments book. My appointments will be full every day because my clients want to come to me first to get the excellent in hairdressing. So, and I said, that's superb. And that's I think the work of schools is to bring students to the end of year 12 where they are proud of their achievements and they have opportunities after year 12 where they'll feel fulfilled. And how you do that is you get to know those children from year 5 or 6. You have programs in place, skill development, all that. But that's the job of schools today. Yeah. Not elitism, not having a bias for a particular pathway,
Absolutely.
Be that university or otherwise. It's about students going on after year 12 feeling fulfilled and proud of themselves.
But even with that, I totally agree, Dr. Paul, but if I could be annoying a little bit and even dive into that from a slightly different angle about what you said, if anything, it supports your argument more, but from a different nuance. Think about someone like Jerry Harvey. Who built one of the most successful businesses in the country. I think he's in the order of $1 billion. I'm sure his assets worth more than $1 billion, personal assets, more than $1 billion, and also famous. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to, do you want to be rich? Do you want to be famous? I mean, these are at the end of the day, what is it you want to do? Let's say someone says, I just want to be rich. Well, you can be rich. There's infinite paths to become rich. You could, but it's nice to do it through something that you believe in. In my opinion, you can only do it something that you really love. Let's take the example of the hairdresser. What stops that person if she has that drive to become rich? We'll even talk about the famous in a second. Only rich. She doesn't want to be famous, let's say, yeah? Who's to say if she has that drive that she can't learn the trade of a hairdresser and open her own salon and ends up building the biggest brand and franchise in the salon industry Earth has ever seen and become multi-billionaire? Yeah.
That's it. That's the model of Stefan, isn't it? Do you know Stefan hair salons? Mainly out of Queensland.
I don't know. Who's that guy? Sorry.
Yeah, mainly out of Queensland. 4 decades ago, he had a dream. Hairdresser. He had one salon. Then he had several, and he had a number in a couple of cities. They moved all around Queensland.
What are they called now?
It's still Stefan, Stefan.
I didn't know. Maybe they don't. We don't have them in Sydney.
Symbol. No, you don't.
Is that why I didn't recognise the name? I'm sorry. It's
a classic why he didn't move. And so that's the thing, isn't it? With one of my sons did not go straight away to university, and from a teacher and a principal thing, it's like, okay, well, I can live with that. But did his apprenticeship as a motor mechanic. Got his apprenticeship with Porsche, and then worked in that for a while, and then realised that I don't want to be working on the tools all my life. So I went back to university to do mechanical engineering. Took him a long time because wasn't the natural student, didn't like school, like the co-curricular of school, rugby and all that, and then became a mechanical engineer, and now is in management within mechanical engineering. And I can see him running his own business not too far away.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing. If you aspire for excellence at the level you're at, and it's your desire to move above that, you can achieve it.
But even in this example, although it's a beautiful example, but your son didn't have to follow that path to become a multi-billionaire in something they love. He didn't need the degree necessarily, especially in a country like Australia. We are so lucky, and students should really know this.
Yes.
I cannot tell you how lucky we are. You know, in so many countries, for you to run, let's say, an engineering company, you have to be an engineer. There's a monopoly. There's this association thing. You've got to be part of the boys and girls, whatever, that those engineering folks can only become an engineering company. In Australia, if you have the grit, you can become a billionaire and you can become famous without any of that. It's really your grit. It's your determination and whatever that you want to do. take Jerry Harvey. Not only became rich, he became famous. Did he do any media degree? No. Did he do any business degrees? No. He opened that business. So for him, money wasn't just enough. He wanted to become famous. He decided to be the face of the company, started to do all these commercials. Who in Australia doesn't know the voice even, let alone know the face of Jerry Harvey? In his mind, he wanted to be rich and he wanted to be famous. He did it through his own paths from something he loved, which is retail or trade or whatever you want to call it. You're trading things, I mean.
Yeah. It's a challenge for schools educating kids because I think the new Australians, just call it about people who weren't born here but have come to Australia for opportunity,
Sure.
have the mindset that you have, I think. So some will struggle because
we appreciate what we have here, right? Because we've seen the right.
Whereas some of the generational Australians
like my
coming
son.
through seem to have less of a work ethic, less of motivation, more entitled.
I mean, I don't really. It's such an interesting point. I don't necessarily say. I'm not really necessarily saying it's worth, because at the end of the day, you're going to learn very quickly if you want to be. If this is your goal in life, you want to build a lot of money. You've got to have the work ethics, because very easily you're going to start to see that I'm not going anywhere, or I've been kicked out of companies now 10 in the last few years. You're going to really learn it very quickly. I don't have a problem with that too much, the work ethics, because at the end of the day, if you don't want to do much in your life, this is the kind of person you are. You just want to be able to afford some kind of rent or whatever. We're a kind of country that's kind enough. You can probably live all your life like that. I don't mind if that's what you want to do. But what I'm saying is we have the option, if you want to be famous,
right.
if you want to be rich, what's beautiful about it, you can do it through stuff that you love.
I agree. If you want to be successful, you find what it is that gets you out of bed of a morning, keeps you up at night,
and you can
know,
go anywhere with that. You can go anywhere.
And Anwar, when I talk to people about, say, fatigue or burnout, any of those terms where people are overwhelmed at work and they're struggling and, they have challenges around their well-being, it's not an antidote, but I recommend that people do work that brings them joy. That's the if you feel joyful about your work and you're energized by the work you do,
sky's the limit.
Yeah, then the concepts of fatigue and burnout are generally not evident, because if you do find that joy, you look for it in other parts of your life as well. It's not just a work thing, is it? So I think that's part of the important work of schools, because we are growing adults. The schools have the responsibility for the next generation of, people who work in health, people who work in social work, whatever it might be, political life. That's our job, and we have to keep that in mind, that every child that we have in our school has that potential. And how do we nurture and develop that? Because we will be a poorer country if we have this concept of entitlement, which seems to be growing in the workforce more than I like.
Look, I agree, but I just feel as a young kid, the concept, I mean, there's so many sort of nuance to it, but one of these threads is I want to have influence in life. I want to be famous. I want to be rich. I want to have a certain lifestyle. I want to have a bunch of cars, etc. Very soon you're going to learn as a young man to be able to do that. You've got to start to get shit together, right? Start to focus to do so.
Doesn't materialise out of nothing, does it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think, you will very soon learn that hard lesson. But you're right. In some cases, it could be a little bit too late if they don't have guidance early in life to let them know that if that's where you want to be, you're looking at certain the discipline. I think it is a good word, no matter what that means. It is about discipline with that focus, meaning priorities in life. It becomes about, you got to pick your priorities right if that is where you want to be,
And I use the term stretch people, children, young adults being stretched in either their physicality, response to challenging situations, or their thinking. That's very, very important. Because
physically and mentally. Push the boundary a little, stretch them.
So, and part of the response that schools have made to this is in, say, camping programs, where rather than every child having to do the same set of activities, they now have choices and options. So if you're talking about an expedition or walking, the very able ones will carry their 20-kilogram backpack and they might go on a 20-kilometre walk and sleep overnight outdoors.
That's solid.
The others may have their backpacks carried for them from one campsite to the next. Their walk might be 5 kilometres, and at the end of the day, they may be required to cook their own food where the other group might have it prepared for them.
So no matter what the level is, you want to stretch it a little.
That's it. That's my point. And I think for schools, this is where the very good work can happen, is to take people from where they're at, add value.
I totally agree.
And you do that by stretching people. You're in business as well, don't you? If you want innovation or new product design,
Got to stretch.
you've got to stretch people's thinking. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
I totally agree with that. No, you're right. The biggest lesson from school and university is not the exact knowledge about a certain topic. It's the fact that you build certain confidence from the fact that you surprise yourself how much you can do, because you were leaders like yourself created a program to give them a taste of that.
Yeah.
And that's when they become to use that becomes what we call reproducible skills in areas they want to apply themselves into for whatever love they have or passion they have.
I did a physics degree, first degree, and I'm still in shock that I passed or graduated because of how hard it was. It was so hard. And it didn't come naturally to me because I did it because I wanted to be a teacher.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be a physicist or an engineer. I wanted to be a teacher. And I felt the best way to do that was to become subject matter expert and then do your teaching qualification post your first degree. And for me, that was a huge stretch, but I got through with it. And why did I get through it? Resilience, parent values, supports, self-awareness, hard work. So that, I can't oversimplify it, but that's a bit missing for lots of young people in their development. They make too many decisions. When I went to school, I wasn't really involved in the decisions around which school I went to, and so on. Parents made those sorts of decisions.
That's normally the case. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's changed, hasn't it, considerably? I don't like this. I don't like that.
There's some choices now.
Yeah. So while I think it's important for children to have voice, adults must make decisions on their behalf because they can't think like adults.
Yeah.
They don't have the wisdom.
Yeah.
They don't have the experience.
But also there's financial considerations or realities in many cases.
There's some pragmatism, isn't there?
There's some, Okay. Can I ask you this question in terms of speaking of people learning from this podcast, especially if this falls into the hands of a leader of a school, such as a principal? What are the 3 most common mistakes from consulting with so many leaders out there, school leaders? What are the top 3, the 3 most common mistakes that school leaders are making these days in this kind of part of, at this sort of in recent history, in the last sort of 10 years?
Avoiding making decisions, thinking that you can make decisions by consensus. So one of the problems that has emerged in the last decade or so, leaders feel hamstrung to make decisions because of the consequences or impact. So indecisiveness is a big problem for leaders in schools. That would be the first one. So they think consensus by decision making by consensus. That doesn't work. Collaboration's different. Working together as a team, seeking input and opinion and so on works. Perspectives, but the leader must make the decision, and that's what in schools, parents and teachers and students expect the principal to be able to make a decision. That would be the first problem that I see. Yep. The second problem is poor communication skills, really poor communication skills. So not understanding stakeholder engagement, not understanding how the different stakeholders might perceive a message, or not understanding how, to communicate well, you've got to use multiple forms, you've got to do it repeatedly, but poor communication, not taking people into the why, that type of
but that's hard
leadership.
To build in a leader. Someone could be a really good leader, but maybe what I'm saying doesn't make sense, but I'm just saying, how do you teach them communication skills? It takes a long time.
Absolutely. And it comes from that journey they go on from where, when they're at school, were they interested in speaking? What was the communications?
Yeah.
Young men, did they write well? Did they read? One of the greatest gifts we could give men is to get them into reading well, because part of the problem with the challenging behaviours of boys is vocabulary. So when they're in a tight spot, they just don't have the vocabulary skills to say, listen, I don't like the way you're speaking to me. That. So, but the second one would be communication that leaders ought to be working strenuously on is communication. The first one is decision-making ability. And the third one, which I think is so important for principals these days, but we're seeing the lack of skill area, is this whole concept of holistic leadership, that as a principal, you're in charge of the lot. The buck stops with you. So those principals who are averse to accountability are going to struggle.
So to accountability?
Averse. If they're averse to accountability,
yeah.
So you said it to me earlier on, with everything that goes on, there's only one person that's next on the block, and that's the principal or the boss. So the principals have to understand that the buck stops with them. They're responsible for the lot. Delegate. By all means, bring in a team around you that are going to do a great job. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's personal. And so I don't think there's enough principals coming in to the job now who understand that concept of the buck stops with me and what that means from a leadership perspective, an accountability perspective. So, if something went wrong in my school, it was a disaster, abject failure, I'd be the one saying, I apologise.
Yeah.
We should have done better. Yeah. We overlooked this. We didn't expect that sort of response, but I would be the one speaking and saying that. But there's
also legal responsibility even. It's even stronger than that. Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no, so look, off the top of
these
the
are
cuff,
the three things,
they would be the three: decision-making, communication and accountability.
Okay.
So if they're missing, we've got a rudderless ship.
So these are the top common mistakes or areas where
lack of development
that you spend most of your time coaching and developing leaders.
And coaching, developing is challenging people, courageous conversations, difficult situations. I spend a lot of time there because that's hard work. So that's a skill area of development. Courageous conversations, challenging situations, difficult situations. That's an important area of development. Mm-hmm. So people thinking about becoming school leaders, start working in that space.
Got it.
Don't shy away from it. Don't walk away from it. Lean into it.
Why would a teacher, is that the past typically, a teacher and then a manager?
You said earlier on, and that is. So generally our principals were teachers.
Okay.
Whether they were good or bad teachers.
Sure.
But they were teachers, then they were a head of department or a head of section, then they were a head of school or a head of teaching and learning or a head of co-curricular, boarding, and then they become principals.
If you're one of these people I was sort of indirectly or maybe directly referring to or describing someone who want to become rich, relatively speaking, rich, I don't know, they aspire to have a couple of houses and 2-3 cars, as in rich, meaning they want to be worth $20 million by the time they retire. Let's say someone aspires to be that. It could be the principal of a large school, could aspire them to be that. How much, could someone be earning $500,000? Give us an idea of what kind of rewards principals get.
The character there that you're talking about, I don't see many of those people who set out wanting to be rich, I have to say. I don't see that, but I accept that in the demography of Australia, there's plenty of people who want to have money, and for whatever reason, and they put value on that and they put worth on that. But for principals, in independent schools, well, if we start with government, public schools, it would be medium-sized schools. Say we took 500, 700 kids, 100, 150 staff. But they would be earning somewhere around $200,000, $250,000 as a start, as an entry point.
Sure.
But that would be after to probably 15 years. So it's not like you wake up tomorrow as a teacher and say, I want to be a principal, there's a pathway and there's learning.
15 years. So
but they could be 200 to 250.
You could be at the age of 35.
Yeah, but to high hundreds of thousands, honestly, in the schools with budgets of 100 million, 1,000 staff. We're talking very, very
to $1 million,
large.
you're saying?
I would say absolutely.
Okay, so
yeah.
someone could. Therefore, that's great.
Absolutely.
That's
And yeah,
so good to know.
if they manage themselves, they're sustaining in the role. They
Because
certainly
you don't want to lose.
they could develop a nice lifestyle for themselves.
That's good to know, because where I'm coming with this is it would be a shame for the sake of my kids, which is now they've gone out of school, which is only a son, Joe, bless him. But let's say his kids, my grandkids. It would be a shame for us as a community, for this country, to miss out on talented people who are good human beings, love the concept of educating and creating young kids, turning young kids into leaders, which is really what this is all about. They love and passionate about that. But at the same time, they want to be comfortable, and they go, therefore, it's a shame, but I've got to leave that industry because I do want to end up with about worth $10, $20 million in 30 years' time.
Yeah. See, the part of the problem is that the graduate teacher, straight from university into teaching, is rather poorly paid compared to their counterpart in accounting or law or other, graduate programs like engineering or whatever. And so it takes a teacher quite a long time. And the best teacher in the country, most experienced, gets the greatest results from their kids, has wonderful rapport in that, they're capped at a salary of around about, varies in states, about $120,000. So you could have a teacher with 20 years experience doing an outstanding job on the behalf of the youth of this country. Their salary is capped. So they leave the classroom to go into management, and they may not be good at that. So if you want to stay in education and access reasonable income to give you a lifestyle, you can't.
That's a shame.
And so
that's not good.
And our brightest won't go into teaching because the salaries on entry are too low, but secondly, the jobs, they perceive it as too hard from their own school experience. Now, if we look at what's happening in 2025 in Australian schools, social media is out there telling us what it looks like. It's a pretty tough place.
It really hurts me too.
So kids are going, look, I don't want to do that. Yeah. Why would I do that when I can go and do some of these other professions?
It's not good. Why?
No. Yeah.
Why is it the case?
Well, there's I think a diabolical failure of governments in this country to properly resource schools. Now, that doesn't mean more dollars. That means professionals. That means teaching, but also other professionals in schools who can work with children who have more challenging behaviours. Assets. A child will grow and flourish in a school where they go to where there's a lot of pride all around them. And I used to ensure that our grounds were really well presented, not because it was a good public look, because the children would appreciate
they
their
feel
environment.
Proud of being there. This is my home.
Right.
This is where I work.
This is where I'm sitting at lunchtime, and look, it's a nice place to sit. So I think part of the problem is that this country is poorly resourced when it comes to education. Government should hang their heads, because what is the purpose of a federal government if it isn't health, safety and education?
I cannot tell you the answer to that. If it's not that, I cannot find another answer.
Yeah, and what is the prosperity of this country depends upon the quality of its educational programs, and that needs to be resourced. Yeah. Now, as I said, my argument is not more money, but it would help. It would help if teachers were paid more. We might attract the quality. If the programs and the resources and the after-school opportunities were strengthened. Genuinely problematic behaviours had infrastructure and supports for those, instead of just saying to teacher, you've got to put up with it. So I think there are some fundamental failings in governments, which have been for decades, around how schools are funded in this country. Because I'm a taxpayer, have been for a long time, and what I would want from a government, health, and just look at the diabolical behaviours from the current treasurer over superannuation. Like they're finding other ways now to tax people's super. How do you get a healthy superannuation fund if you haven't worked hard, put money aside, and then they go, well, we're going to take your money because guess what? You were really successful. You had a thriving business and you paid a lot of tax and you put it into super, and when are going to take some more of that? Sorry, I'm on government now, but it's a flawed model in this country, one of the highest taxed countries in the world, and I just think that like policing, safety, health, and some of those other education, basic provisions that smart countries have, we don't have. We don't have. So
It's really, when I learned about it, was probably 15 years ago, I felt very sad when I heard the reality that in all the major cities around the Western world, let's just take, say Europe, England, Australia, Canada, US, that kind of thing, the frontline workers, including, teachers and, as you said, the first responders, etc., they can't live where they work.
That's right.
I felt sad when it actually sunk in that they have to travel for, in some cases, an hour and a half. In our cases would be the Blue Mountains area.
Well, I think I absolutely agree. And the key workforce we need to be high functioning and performing in our communities, as you say, can't afford to live in Sydney or Melbourne or Canberra.
Something's wrong about that.
Absolutely. There is. And the thing, Sydney is one of the most expensive cities in the world to live. There's no question. But some people wear that as a badge. But I'm sorry, that's not. So I do a little bit of travel overseas.
It is not. Absolutely
I'm fortunate that I can do a bit of travel overseas.
Yep.
And one thing I do, my maths background, I suppose, and some people might say it's a bit to do with your compulsive behaviours, but I always have a look at the cost of living in other countries because I like to know, well, how much money do I need to take?
Yeah.
And you have a look at the comparisons, a litre of milk, the staples, milk, bread, beer,
basics.
whatever it might be. And coffee. And you see overseas you're going to pay the equivalent of $1.50 in Australia for a coffee. Here you're paying $6 and $7 in some of them. Well, how can you justify that? So there's something wrong, isn't there, with our social fabric that the frontline people can't live in the places where they work. And that adds to their cost anyway, travel time, But, we probably want to invite a politician on for a response, Anwar.
I will do a webinar where I'll bring yourself and a few other people, smart people from the schools, including business managers and some politician.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
I want to finish with an interesting, controversial, funny, interesting topic. Okay, when I retire, here's what I was. Well, one of the things, they've got about a few options now. One of the things I'm very passionate about is this crazy concept whereby we only start to learn about mental health and understanding mental health when we are adults out of school and out of unis in some cases, most likely when we are at work and start to really face the pressures of life. We start to learn about mental health and how to cope with mental health issues such as anxiety, which is so common. I want to hopefully retire with martial logic with some money, as you can understand. I want to put some of my money and raise money from other like-minded successful people or billionaires and dedicate it to getting meditation even into the first year of school. I've seen my son doing some meditation when he was young. These kids just following whatever the teacher's doing, say, close your eyes. They're going, you can see they're not really doing anything, they're having fun with it. But I want to bring this to as young, give them these coping mechanisms such as meditation to deal with anxiety if and when it arises from as early time as possible. Give them that incredibly life skill that helps them to deal with life before they hit the time. Once it got to you, if you're not equipped how to deal with it, it's too late.
Yes.
Not only the awareness, so some people, they're struggling with anxiety, they're still not even comfortable with the fact that they can see a psychologist. They think this is taboo, let alone actually having skills or strength or certain resilience tools to deal with it. Can you see how far we are? I'm not only talking about these young men to remove the taboo, which is a lot of awesome people doing that. That taboo is reducing. Mental health is a bit more cooler to talk about. Young people more comfortable to see a psychologist. We're not there, but a lot better thanks to incredible psychologists who now probably would be in their age of 60s. They've been doing that work in the last 25 years. They really influence the culture to make it less taboo. Take my hat off to them. But I think we need to do more. I think it needs to start with the first year at school, allocate more time to we've got to find the resources to bring the right people, the right professionals. Maybe the teachers need to be learned more. Maybe teachers need to be able to deliver some of that content, or do we bring experts? I don't know how it's going to work out, but we need these kids to learn about meditation and about well-being and stuff like that from very young age.
There's a lot of good work in schools, in the schools that I'm familiar with, independents, around well-being hubs, spaces and places where children can go to get supports from their teachers and or professionals who are embedded in this, enmeshed in the schools. So it's certainly happening. But our biggest challenge, our biggest challenge, you said about we need to find the time. That's our biggest challenge, because in New South Wales, for example, we have this body called NESA, the Education Standards Authority, who dictate the hours that students must learn chemistry, must learn mathematics, must learn science, whatever it might be. So there's this very dense curriculum already. And so when you talk about a wellbeing program, meditation, or maybe yoga, yes, they might get an hour a week if they're lucky, because of the curriculum that's mandated by the state body that they have to study. And so what's happened in this country is that the state-based associations are still operating in an industrialised model of learning with curriculum and subjects and classrooms, and are failing to deliver what young people need to graduate and be successful and deal with the challenges of life, because we're still sticking to these old curricula. So what happens is it's pushed outside of hours when kids can't access it because they're not local, into lunch breaks.
So the percentage becomes 5-10% participation.
Absolutely. And so the time is not being given to it because of this very dense mandated state-based curricula. And we need the state bodies to free that up for schools so that they can get some more time on programs that are far more contemporary and relevant for kids trying to live and survive, in the generations that they're going to live in. That's an old model. It needs to be upgraded.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that will be another conversation, you and me. When I retire, I'll give you a buzz and we'll start the conversation.
All right.
Hey, man, thank you so much for your time. It was an honor meeting you today. I don't know about the audience. I personally learned a lot from this conversation, so I'm immensely grateful to have you.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful for the opportunity, Anwar. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Bye, everyone. Thank you.